Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Aladumim in Israel. We are creatures of contrast. We can be happy as a lark one minute and depressed to the point of suicide the next. We can be focused and sharp in the morning and foggy and unsteady in the evening. We may find ourselves enthusiastic or uplifted on Monday and down on everything on Tuesday. We float and twist with the times like we are drifting along a turbulent river, wholly subject to the movement of the current. This is who we are. We may like to see ourselves as steady as a large rock in that river, but we know deep down that this is all an illusion. Mood flipping, if anything, is the great constant in our lives. And it is not only with regard to emotions that we are like chameleons. The thinking part of the mind is just as prone to change. We can flip from purely rational to abashedly irrational just as easily as we can change our clothes. Sometimes it seems like there are two or more different individuals in there, sharing the same space and dividing up the time of consciousness. What accounts for this inconsistency? Most of us do have some element of steadiness in our personality, but there's no question that we also have a disturbing amount of variability. Is this simply the way human beings are made? Is it as unavoidable as indigestion or illness? Or is it somehow linked to our experiences, those wild cards of life that shift us into who we turn out to be? Perhaps, like most things associated with the personality, it is both. It is the old nature and nurture combination. Our moods and thought processes change all the time because that is precisely the nature of the human mind when subject to the barrage of experiences we must encounter in the course of life. This flexibility displays itself also in what we can call the spiritual domain. This is that portion of life that is not simply thinking or feeling, but attempting to grasp in some way the ineffable aspect of reality. This hard-to-define arena encompasses everything from striving to improve ourselves morally or personally to searching and groping for that elusive element of the divine in the world and in our lives. It is frequently associated with what we can call mysterious, since it by definition defies explanation. The spiritual is that component of our lives and of our reality that cannot be quantified or restricted by any mental or emotional limits. It goes where it goes with the range of the imagination, powered ever onward by the energy of the will. In this realm also, we find ourselves confronted with a baffling and frequently disturbing amount of inconsistency. We may be gripped by a pull of holiness for the oddest of reasons in one instance, but thrust out of it by some urge of selfishness or lust the next. This lack of spiritual control over our own minds and personalities can be enormously frustrating for those who seek spirituality in their lives. It would be so much easier if we could just take a spiritual pill every once in a while and bask in the glory of God or meditate or whatever, as long as we wish. This is not a new state of the human condition. On the contrary, it is as old as recorded history, if not longer. As long as the human mind was capable of deep thought and complex emotions, of searching for some sense of the spiritual and of being pulled away from it, we have been subject to this back and forth roller coaster of experience. Ancient texts reveal that this was the way things have been since people decided to write down their experiences to preserve them in some permanent form. The Bible is perhaps the primary example of this all-too-human trait. People go back and forth throughout the stories. In one chapter, someone is reaching out for God, and another, they are struggling with their ego. Adam and Eve speak to God like we speak on the phone, but they also speak just as much to that snake. Cain brings an offering to Hashem from the best of his produce, but then turns around and kills his brother for the flimsiest of reasons. Jealousy and anger infect those who are seen as paragons of righteousness. King David can compose psalms to the glory of God and lust after the wife of one of his captains to the point that he sends him off to certain death in war. This week's Parsha is called Naso. That short word is the title to the longest Parsha in the Torah. It seems to go on and on endlessly. The first third is comprised of many different subjects, ranging from a continuation of the census of the Levite tribe that began in the previous Parsha, to laws concerning the purity of the encampment through the wilderness, to certain specifics about various offerings. The second third deals with a couple of very unique and very biblical situations. The first of these is called the sota, or suspected adulteress. This rather long section details the procedure for investigating a wife who is suspected of unfaithful behavior by her husband. Much of this section deals with the odd ceremony in which this suspected woman drinks a mixture of water, earth, and a small piece of parchment with curses directed to the unfaithful wife written upon it. This ceremony is strange even by biblical standards, and it raises questions about how to resolve unresolvable social matters. This section is followed by an equally long and detailed section dealing with the obscure subject of the Nazir. The Nazir is a person who has taken a very specific vow of abstinence. The vow, which must last for a minimum of 30 days, requires the one who accepts it to not partake of any grape products, to not shave or trim any hair on the head, and to not have any contact with a corpse. While this might seem like an odd combination of things to abstain from, this is nevertheless the formula for fulfilling the Nazirite vow. When the vow is successfully completed, the Nazir brings a few offerings and goes back to leading a normal life. Following this is the few verses of Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing. This beautiful blessing is to be recited daily by the Kohanim, the priests, to all of the Israelites. It has become the classic biblical blessing, bestowing protection, enlightenment, and peace upon all who receive it. It is still recited to this day in many synagogues around the world, and in almost all in Israel. The final third of the parsha is a very long description of offerings brought by the leaders of all the tribes in honor of the dedication of the central altar. These offerings are all identical, but the Torah writes them all out in detail. It is unclear why all 12 have to be repeated and then the entire total of all the animals and various other products written out. This is one of those puzzling sections of the Torah that makes little sense to a modern reader, but somehow fits into the entire biblical picture. Let's get back to that section about the Nazir. There are some interesting details about the Nazir that are easy to miss. One is that the Torah attributes to the Nazir the elevated status of kadosh, or holy, for taking on and completing this personal vow. This status is not something the Torah allots to just anyone. The Nazir is unique among the many possible cases of people trying to elevate themselves spiritually. Because of this vow, this person has achieved something that few can genuinely claim: holiness. There is one other seemingly minor detail about the Nazir that is even easier to overlook. This is the fact that when the vow is completed, among the offerings that the Nazir must bring is what is called a sin offering. There are actually 3 animal sacrifices required, but the other 2 are what one might expect at the completion of such a vow. This sin offering, however, is certainly not expected. Sin offerings are exactly what they sound like. They are brought when a person sins. But how does this apply to the Nazir? What sin did the Nazir commit in making this vow? It happens that this is a fairly famous question, and it is asked in the primary source of rabbinic Judaism, the Talmud. The answer given there is that the Nazir was guilty of the sin of denying himself or herself access to forms of pleasure in the world. This may seem like something that the Torah would be advocating rather than calling a sin, since there are so many forms of pleasure that are explicitly forbidden in the Torah. The idea here is that the Torah does forbid many forms of pleasure, but that which is associated with the Nazirite vow, the consuming of grape products, is not at all forbidden. The Nazir, in going beyond what the Torah forbids, by accepting an extra prohibition on wine and grape juice, has needlessly set out on a path of denial of a form of pleasure. For this, the Talmud claims, the Nazir must bring a sin offering. So we have a situation in which this Nazir is called both holy for taking on this vow and also called a sinner for the denial of pleasure. How could the same person doing the act of vowing and completing this commitment to refrain from these things, be both a sinner and holy? It seems like it should be one or the other, but not both at the same time. But the fact is that both are indeed applied to this Nazir, as impossible as it may seem. Perhaps the resolution to this contradiction lies in the nature of a human being. We are creatures of contradiction. We see it in ourselves all the time. We see it even in matters that fall under the rubric of the spiritual. The Nazir is a perfect example of this. There is definitely a spiritual component to what the Nazir is attempting, abstaining from certain pleasures or activities that normal life would include. For that, the Nazir is called holy. Holiness, in the case of the Nazir, is the elusive quality of willing oneself to do something that goes against human nature. That act of veering from what is naturally and commonly done is an act of holiness. It is setting oneself apart from the norm by a sustained act of will. But this very act of will is itself problematic. It requires the denial of a permitted form of pleasure. In a sense, this is an act of cruelty to oneself, hence the need for that sin offering. The Nazir is doing both of these acts, the act of willful holiness and the act of deliberate denial of pleasure, at the same time. The reason that it is possible to be both holy and a sinner simultaneously is that this is who we are. The human mind is so complex and so multifaceted that an act of holiness can also be a sin. One does not preclude the other because we as human beings are capable of being both holy and guilty, even within the same act. The Nazir vow demonstrates the inherent contrasts in the human personality. Shabbat Shalom.